Thank you for joining this critical conversation on women's rights, empowerment, and abortion in South Carolina. Regardless of personal beliefs about the issue, it is essential to recognize that every woman has the right to make decisions concerning her own body. It is not for any individual, male or female, in an elected position to make that choice on behalf of all women. The South Carolina State House has sought to restrict the rights of marginalized communities with a particular focus on women, especially Black women, using both state and federal constitutions. To shed light on this important issue, we had the opportunity to interview three wonderful women who offered their perspective on things and spoke their truth about their fight for women's equality, women's empowerment, and women's access. Courtney Thomas, Communications Director for Cypress Fund, Catherine Fleming Bruce, the Executive Operations Director of the Richland County Democratic Party, and Allison Terracio, Planned Parenthood advocate and Richland County Councilwoman, joined us in this discussion. We hope this conversation will help open up discussions about women's rights and how all of us can get involved to make our state, country, and world a better place for everyone. For more content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell so that you can get alerts when new content is available. Visit cubnsc.com or find us on Meta at cubnsc.
Well, my name is Catherine Fleming Bruce. I am a community activist, author. I'm engaged in preservation. Right now, I am the Director of Operations for Richland County Democratic Party, and I'm also a candidate for chair of the state party.
I'm Courtney Thomas. I'm the Director of Communications for the Cypress Fund. We're a 501c3 social justice organization that grants money to organizations and people in North and South Carolina who are fighting for systemic change in a whole host of areas. So reproductive justice is just one of them, also environmental justice and Indigenous sovereignty. So
Allison Terracio, also use she, her pronouns. I work for Planned Parenthood South Atlantic and Planned Parenthood Vote South Atlantic, and my title is Advocacy Campaigns Manager. And I've been doing this work for the past 3 or 4 years. I also serve on Richland County Council.
I think I am a little different from some of my more modern feminist peers because I believe that women's rights is really about understanding the sovereignty and agency of all people. So what's good for women is actually good for everyone. So I practice a politic that says that we should focus on addressing the most marginalized first and then allow that, rising tide to raise all ships. Because right now, especially in South Carolina, the most marginalized people happen to be women, and a lot of those people are queer as well.
When I hear the words like women's rights, I always want to clarify, because I really want to say, are you really talking about abortion? Because if you're talking about abortion, you should say abortion. If you're talking about, the whole host of issues surrounding, people who can become pregnant, then we can use that umbrella term. But a lot of times people are just really afraid to say the word abortion. And I do a lot of teaching people to talk about abortion around the state.
So, even before we get to the context of talking about abortion and these laws that are being passed that say, well, if you get pregnant, you must have a child or we're going to give you the death penalty. There's so many other surrounding things that we're not talking about or we're refusing to talk about. We don't talk about maternal mortality. I actually have a niece, several nieces who live in New York, and one of them was having her first baby last year and almost at the point of giving birth. And we got this phone call from my sister sometime around midnight saying that, my niece was dead. And what happened to her and what happened to the child that was born by C-section, both of them passing away in that year, really made me look again at the statistics, at the things that are facing women. We're not talking as much about domestic violence, where there, several years ago, we were number one in the country in South Carolina for domestic violence. So hopefully this is a year when we can change that and say all of these things are connected. How women are impacted and their families by the issue of abortion, women who are marginalized, criminalized in South Carolina, and some of the things that we can do to remedy that in conversation.
And really, we don't talk about bodies, right?
No.
We don't talk about bodies and how they work. We don't talk about your body.
Mhm.
We don't talk about my body.
Mhm.
We don't talk about anybody. And so when we think about, everything from puberty, menstruation, pregnancy, how it happens, birth, how that happens, there's so much. It's a private thing that can happen. You need to be private in order to do a lot of these functions, but it's not secret, right?
Yes.
And so, and shouldn't be kept as if it is some shameful secret.
Right.
And I think the more that we talk about bodies, how they work, and be open with ourselves, with each other, with our kids, then they're more empowered when they walk into a doctor's office, when they walk into a hospital, all of those things. I used to be a doula. And so I walked into the birthing places with women about to, in labor, about to give birth. And one of the things that would happen is you would almost see, they would take their clothing. I was in New York at that time, and they were, very professional women, and they take off their professional clothes and they put on that hospital gown, and it's almost like there's a difference, there's a change in empowerment when that happens.
I think a lot of what you're hearing out of Texas, Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, all these places, South Carolina's been doing that for decades, but there are so many things stacked together here. So you have there has not been a Democratic majority in the state house since the 80s.
Right.
And there hasn't been a Democratic governor since the 90s. And you have generations of South Carolinians who have been systematically oppressed. So when things like the horrible bills that come up in the state house happen, you have an electorate of people who have been disempowered. So their voices are constantly overshot by the loudest and the most extreme politicians. So you don't need to be looking at DeSantis. Look at McMaster. We don't have to look very far to see where these other states got these ideas. They're getting them from us. We wrote the book, quite literally. South Carolina is the birthplace of the Confederacy. We have chapter 1. We have everything that you're seeing in these other places. And now, I only hope that people are able to see more clearly what's going on, because it is being echoed in other places. Sometimes it's harder to see and hear things that are very close to you. But now that we're seeing this rippling effect of anti-trans bills, anti-abortion bills, and like anti-freedom, anti-truth, things that are happening all over the country, maybe we're able to look inside and say, oh, this has been happening in the General Assembly for a very long time.
What does it profit anybody to make it more difficult for women to have an abortion?
How
She's
long?
heard them all.
So this could take all day. So there's a lot of money to be moved around based on in the anti-abortion space, right? The history of the anti-abortion movement really starts with the integration, with school integration, right? Once the white evangelicals realized that they had truly lost school integration, their politicians needed something to get them riled up again. And that was just a couple of years really after Roe versus Wade was decided. And so there has been a lot of money poured into politicians, poured into churches, poured into every kind of movement that you can think of to fund the anti-abortion movement. It is an ecosystem that is reliant on people being encouraged to give all of their money to these, it used to be TV preachers and now it's internet preachers. So a lot of the people who protest at Planned Parenthood are what you would normally think of as a street preacher type person. They have GoPros that they wear. They film themselves yelling at people coming into their healthcare appointments. And then they post those videos online and they say, look at me, I'm out here saving, these women, saving the babies, and donate to my ministry, right? Here's my link, click it to donate now, to keep me going so that I don't have to have a job. I can stand out here 5, 6, however many days a week, protesting. It's also very much tied into white supremacy and male supremacy, right? I mean, those things go together, right? They go really hand in hand. You can keep people, if you can keep people in an ideology, right? There's, I was just talking about, there's a 17-year-old girl who stands outside Planned Parenthood right now, who literally will just run in front of cars. And she didn't get that from nowhere, right? She didn't get that idea from nowhere. She was raised in this belief system that it was up to her to just, you can see the desperation on her face to try to stop people from coming in because she has been raised to believe a certain way, right? And so that is keeping her in a certain ideology that she's not going to break out of because she doesn't want to break out of her family. She doesn't want to break out of her tribe. She is incentivized to pour into her white male religious system, right? And so she depends on that, and they depend on her to keep the narrative going, to keep the story going.
It would be one thing, if we were dealing with, a class of zealots, right? But there are so many more people who have deep investments in this. So you have the zealots, you have your corporate class that's like upholding politicians and these systems. But then there are, your opportunists, right? There are people elected in the state house right now who don't care about abortion. They don't care. They care about retaining their power, and they see this opportunity to capitalize on fanaticism and zealots and capital that's being pushed into this issue to retain their own power. So it's not about saving anybody but themselves.
I come from the country in Kentucky, and my family raises beef cattle, and I can't help but think, and there are also very religious zealots around there. And the women in that community are, if they do not produce another baby every other year, the pastor is coming to their house asking them why they're not pregnant again. I mean, there are definitely people at the State House who have very similar views on women and what we are here on this planet to do.
Well, I'll start big and then I'll go small just to give people an idea. So I think in this conversation, we've talked a lot about, systems, and we talked a lot about, power players, politicians, and CEOs and stuff like that. But it's really easy for men watching this right now. It would be very easy to say, "Oh, I don't do that," or I don't want my wife, girlfriend, partner to be barefoot and pregnant. I don't want that. Sure. But there's more than one way, again, takes all kinds. There's more than one way to uphold white supremacy and the patriarchy, right? So even if you aren't, a anti-abortion protester, even if you aren't a zealot, there are so many ways that when you operate and move in spaces that serve to further subjugate women and femmes and people in their life. So I'll say, a lot of people, let's just say a common experience, employment. Okay, so when you're on your job, do you ever notice that the women at the conference room table are often the ones who are asked to take notes. Mm. Do you notice that all the support staff are women? Mm. Do you notice that maybe people aren't being paid the same as you are, even though you have the same job? So it's things like that, that in the grand scheme of things, like, I mean, we're talking about major, massive systems, and you're like, why does me, speaking up in a boardroom, why does that matter? Mm-hmm. It matters because you're able to change the actual lived reality of people that you interact with. And that is how you break down systems. So it doesn't take a battering ram, it takes lots of small blows. Mm-hmm. So if there are men and other people listening to this who actually care about, striking down this big, scary thing of the patriarchy, white supremacy, you can do that. Like it's a really interesting, it's an interesting thing to kind of break your mind a little bit and say, oh, I'm not a villain, or oh, I'm not a bad guy, or oh, I've never hit a woman. Mm-hmm. It's not just that, right? Mm-hmm. So there are so many things that you can do to make those small blows. Mm-hmm. You can talk about what you're paid, because there's a law that says you can, so you should. And you should also advocate for people who are in your lives. You don't have to have a sister, a mother, a cousin to be invested in these issues. You should be invested because you actually care about humanity and about the future of the state and of the world that we live in. Mm-hmm. So taking those small, tiny hits to white supremacy is something that everyone can do and should. So when you hear your homeboy making a joke about something that sounds like rape, because it probably is, you should say something. Mm-hmm. Because let's game it out like this. How can I ask someone to do a big, scary thing like take on white supremacy or, speak out in front of the Senate, if you can't look at your friend group and say, man, that joke you made, that was wrong.
That ain't cool.
That's not cool. Mm-hmm. Like, how can I ask you to do that big thing if you're not willing to do the small thing? Yeah. So you can prove to the people in your life that you are an advocate, that you are a feminist, that you are someone who we can trust by being present and showing up and making those small efforts.
Yes.
Like when we talk about whatever, smashing the patriarchy or dismantling the system or however we want to put it, it's not about some favor that you're doing for me. This is not an act of charity, right? That men need to recognize what damage patriarchy is doing to them, right? That being caught up in this system is not allowing them to be a vulnerable person, someone who can express their feelings and emotions. That lack of being able to, I don't know what you would say, stand up to someone or give true feedback to someone or be truly in relationship with someone, whether it's a woman or a femme in your life or your friend or your son or whoever it is, living in this patriarchal system is damaging everyone. Mm-hmm. It's keeping men from being able to truly engage, on a one-to-one. Think about relationships with men and think about just just backing up like a classic male-male relationship. We have like the Saturday Night Live skits or whatever that kind of make fun of just two men sitting on a couch, not being able to have a conversation with each other. Like, think about how harmful that is to not be able to express if someone has hurt you, or if you have affection for someone, or if you want to learn more about their inner world or share more about your inner world. Mm-hmm. You're shutting down so many opportunities to experience the richness of life when patriarchy is your system that is governing everything, and you can't say to someone, hey man, that joke wasn't cool, or hey man, the way you treated that person wasn't cool. I think so. I'm having conversations. I have a 14-year-old, and when I was growing up, there was all this heaviness around like the talk. You're going to sit down and you're going to have this 45-minute to an hour talk, and that's going to be, you're going to open the door, you're going to have the conversation, and you're going to shut that door right back. And so I've been more inclined to think about the talk as in 2 or 3 minutes, right? Just a few minutes in passing. We're in the car, we're making dinner together, we're, cleaning out a drawer together. And we just say a few things about something about a healthy relationship or consent or how we treat someone else, or an experience that we've had. And we use stories to weave in our values.
Something that can be done in a few minutes. I like that.
So we're hinting at, and we're getting to what are sometimes called crisis pregnancy centers. We tend to call them anti-abortion centers or fake clinics sometimes. And they have existed for long, for decades, right? And they are places where that I think I call it cosplaying, like they're cosplaying like they're a health center. And they, you can always tell because they'll offer free ultrasounds or free pregnancy tests or free this or free that. And really what they are ways to lure people who are in, who either are pregnant or think they may be pregnant. They lure them in with this promise of something free. And then once they get you in the door, they take your information. Now, these are places who are not medically licensed. They do not have to adhere to HIPAA. So if I come in and I give you my phone number, my address, my medical health information in a real doctor's office, they have to keep that secret. My dentist can't tell you how many cavities I have. I can tell you how many cavities I have, but my dentist can't, right? And so these places, they lure people in. They invite you to take the test or lay down and get the ultrasound. These are called limited ultrasounds. They are not really diagnostic. They're usually performed by someone who has very limited training. And they will not give you any information until after you have already completed whatever counseling they may require you to take. It may be you have to watch a video. It may be you have to listen to some lecture. It may be that you have to pray with them before they give you. So I don't want a side of religion with my healthcare. I don't know about y'all. And that those all should be red flags, but people feel sort of trapped, like they can't, no one's holding you inside physically, but you want the results or you want to be sort of given permission to leave. And so people will sit there and endure this counseling or whatever you want to call it. And then finally, maybe they'll give you the result. And a lot of times what they do is they will give you misinformation about what they have seen in the ultrasound. So they'll say, oh, well, you're only 6 weeks pregnant, but really you're 10 weeks pregnant. So they'll say, oh, well, you have plenty of time to make a decision. When really maybe that person goes home, they wait a couple of weeks and now they're in a different place in their pregnancy and they have a different maybe access to abortion. So it limits them, it pushes them into essentially forced pregnancy.
Pregnancy is fraught with a lot of health challenges and life-threatening conditions sometimes. We had a city councilwoman who lost her child. So these things are very difficult and dangerous journeys to go on. So for someone to say, oh, you have to do this and you don't have any choices about it, it's not tolerable.
It's honestly a death sentence for a lot of people.
Yes.
Because we know that just based off of your race, location, and so many other health factors, that specifically in South Carolina, if you are a Black birthing person, it is much more dangerous to be pregnant here than anywhere else in the country. We got an F from the March of Dimes because our systems that are in place have so much bias in them. There's so much actual violence that happens in the system that it makes it hard for people to, if you want to give birth, give birth and be able to afford it, but also to survive that experience. So taking away people's options about having an abortion or any other host of reproductive healthcare decisions, it traps people literally in a life or death situation. And for so many Black women in particular in this state, it is a deathly situation. So and I think that's a reality that our policymakers really don't not gonna say understand because they know. They know. They're choosing to ignore that because of their interests. So they're literally putting their own interests of money, of their own individual religious beliefs, or just, their self-interest of being in office over the actual lives of people in the state. So that just shows you where their priorities are.
Oh gosh. I'm just thinking that when we talk to each other, it reduces fear of the other and the unknown. And so I just love the conversations. I'm so open to the conversation. So thank you all.
I would say you don't always have to be like put together. You can go to the State House pissed. I often do. And if you need somebody to go with you, I will go with you. And we can shake some tables. It's fine. You don't have to learn anything. You have to be put together before you actually make your voice heard, because you already are the expert of your own life. So yeah.
Oh, that's important to say. And all I want to say is drop everything that makes your life heavy and that makes other people heavy. Just let it go and fly, and we can all move up. We can reach higher ground if we do that. So some of these things can be let go.
I needed to hear that.